Hi, everybody. I'm Amy.
Hi, and this is Audrea.
This is the right crowd. So grab a cup of coffee,
Or a cup of tea.
maybe a little something on the rocks, and let's get started. Okay, so we are continuing our discussion. John Truby's The Anatomy of Story.
Yes.
Okay, so last week we discussed chapters 4 and 5. And this week we are moving on to 6 and 7, which talk about story world and symbol web. And I think for me, okay, so I feel like I need to start with, there's so much information. So much information. Like, it's almost, I don't want to say more than my brain is going, wait, what? But there's so much information that as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that. And the examples he gives are phenomenal for how he backs up everything that he says. So in the story world, I think he brings up Harry Potter. We're going to talk about Harry Potter and Ulysses. And the way he describes story world is that each of these stories created a unique world for the story. In that, in order to really organically connect your characters to what you're doing, you need to do that. Like, you need it to be something that is unique and special to what you're writing. Now, what I'd like to add to that is, on the flip side, you have people like John Grisham, who writes about a detective in DC, who uses real life streets and monuments and things like that. And that connected to me when I lived in Georgetown, because I remember sitting in a Starbucks reading something and going, wait a minute, that's right there, right? So it connected to me, even though it wasn't a unique world. Like, I knew what he was talking about. So I think you could go either way, but whatever you're going to do, make sure that you do it so that if you are using a real life place, that you are accurate in what you say. And if you're using a make-believe place like Harry Potter, that you write it in such a way that it connects all the characters to what you have going on.
Right. I really liked how he talked about the story world, which it took me a while to figure out. Not a while. I was like, the story world, in most books, you would call that the setting, but he calls it the story world because he says it's bigger than just the setting. And if you're to write a good book or a good screenplay, you need to think more about it than just plopping your character down in the middle of Kansas or in the middle of a London street. And I love how he goes on page 156 about detailing the story world. And he talks about the story worlds as bigger things, like not just a street or a town, but he talks about them as more overarching settings, like a natural setting out in the world or an ocean. I'm sorry, that's a subheading or a heading. And then there's outer space and forest, and he talks about what each of those different story worlds or settings could bring to your story and why and he gives great examples for each of those. Like in the forest, of course, you have for a forest story world, you have the Lord of the Rings, you have part of the Harry Potter books, you have Midsummer Night's Dream, the Blair Witch Project. So it's really cool how he talks about the intensity that you can gain from each of these and what each of these brings to your story and how you can play characters off of them.
Yeah, I like how he points out, okay, if you're going to use this is, if you're going to say jungle, this is what the jungle, using a jungle, is going to do to and for your audience. If you're going to use desert or ice, this is what that's going to do. Like, this is how it symbolizes what you're doing. But he also points out not to just use nature happens as happenstance. Like be like thoughtful and mindful about what you're doing and why you're using what you're using. He mentioned a number of times throughout the book to be careful to not mislead readers and to not just throw things in there, because if they have a meaning and you just throw it in there and your reader knows that it's supposed to be XYZ, but you've put it in a place that's not even, you've now lied to your reader. And even though it's not a lie, you've lied to, you've changed their expectation.
For no reason. So it's artificial.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would have, like, as I'm reading this, I'm like, I've never thought of a jungle giving the audience the strongest sense of power of nature over man. In that environment, man is reduced to beast. And I was like, I hadn't thought about that. And then I looked at what his examples were, and I'm like, point taken. You were correct. Of course he's correct. But I mean, it's like you don't even, I didn't realize that that was what it was supposed to be, right? But he just points out to make sure that if you're using a natural setting, don't use it happenstance, and make sure that you are telling the true story of what you're trying to get out to your reader by the natural setting that you chose.
And the other thing I love that he pointed out, which I had never thought of before, because I mean, so no one, the book is, we've whined before how thick this book is and how small the type is, but there's so much in there. But I never thought before about the natural oppositions in these different worlds or different places, settings that you have. Like when he talks about, if you set a story with a central location or in the story world is a mountain, the natural opposition to a mountain is a plain, and he also characterizes the plain. So that could be, and it comes up naturally and organically for some writers. And so I never thought of it that way, that these things have natural oppositions. Like for the ocean, the example he gives for an ocean is that if you set a book or something on an ocean, there's more than just the ocean. It's the ocean, and then very often it's the deep. The surface and the deep are two different settings that are available to you for the ocean. And then of course you have the juxtaposition of a boat. You're going to have some kind of conveyance, unless you have something taken care of, place of, like Atlantis, where it is actually under the ocean. But so,
or Aquaman.
Yeah, Aquaman. But
I mean, I had to bring that up. I mean,
did you though?
I did. I did.
Nothing against Aquaman fans. So yeah, I really like the way he talked about, and he talked about the story world or setting in a way that I'd never thought of it before. And I highlighted the one that was related to the island, because he talks about the best way to express the meaning of the natural setting. And he says it's like, for each of these, it's going to be different, but when you send your characters to an island, that might represent desire, the desire to go there, unless you've set the island up as something different. And then he says to take time in the beginning to set up the normal society and the character's place within it, so you can set up the need of the character, which he talked about earlier in the book, and what is represented by the setting or the story world, like where they're going to or coming from, and how it's going to be different.
When you get past that part, he goes into safety versus adventure and ground versus sky. Like he's changing those back and forth. And I hadn't really thought about it, but when he talked about safety versus adventure, he describes one where he says a character is looking out of a window and thinking about what could be. And I hadn't really thought about that, but that's that is what you do when you stare out of a window, right? You're safe inside, but what would happen if I went out there, right? And where is the house? Like, it's very important where you put that house, because your adventure outside is going to be determined by where your house is located. Is it a hut on that island that has cannibals surrounding you? Or is it in the mountains where you've got the panther waiting outside? Or is it in small town suburbia where everybody has barbecues and their skateboards and their bicycles every day, right? Yep. So I just like how he's putting all these things together that I'd never thought about before.
One of them, I'm gonna say, Amy, the other, speaking of things that I'd never thought about before, he talks about how an object or a story world can be made either, just like you said, lovely or terrifying, like the terrifying house. I really liked how he talked about inside the house, the house as a story world, and then inside the house, you can have different places in opposition or places that symbolize something different, and that speaks to the audience. For example, he talks about the cellar versus the attic, or it would be for us, basement versus the attic. And then one thing that I thought about when he brought that up is that when just about any TV or show or book or whatever it is, everything's fine when you're in the house, unless it's like, a horror house or something. Like, everything's fine. But then when they start talking about, well, let's go down to the basement. I don't know about you, but everybody, what's in the basement? No. I don't know about the basement.
I'll sit here with my coffee. You can go to the basement. I'll wait. Yeah. I'll be when you get back.
I'm not going to your basement. So he talked.
And for me, it's wait, you want me to go in the attic? Yeah, no, I don't know what's up there. I'm good.
What's in the
I don't need whatever you think I need up there. Yeah.
So one other thing, I had a question, like on page 171. He gives lots of great examples of story world technique. He says combining natural settings with the city. I don't know how you felt about this one, but I even have a big, like I didn't get this one. I have to reread it. Mary Poppins. He says that Mary Poppins is a story based on a metaphor of city as ocean. I still need to reread that because I don't get that.
Well, okay, so what the house is like a ship.
Yeah.
Because of the captain, and he blows his horn and all of that stuff, right? So if she is landing on the house, then she would be coming from the sky onto a boat. Mm-hmm. Boats are in the ocean. Right. There's also a couple of the scenes where she is in water.
They do that. And so I feel like I just need to watch Mary Poppins again. Did I even watch the latest one?
Oh, it's good.
Is it? Do you think so?
Oh my gosh, yes. Emily Blunt is the perfect, well, besides the original.
Yeah.
She is like, they couldn't have picked a more perfect person to play Mary Poppins.
Oh my gosh.
It was just fabulous. I actually, okay, side note, I recently saw, and I couldn't tell you how old the video is. I just happened to have recently seen it, where they interviewed Emily Blunt. And she says that her kids at home ask her to sing the Mary Poppins songs all the time. And they replay there's one scene in the bathroom where they go in, and that's the dolphin scene.
Yes, I
remember. She said her kids are always wanting her to replay the dolphin scene, and they slide in the tub, and yeah.
Aw, that's cute.
It's super cute. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
All right.
But yeah, I can see how he gets that, because the captain next door with the horn, because it's the cannon that goes off and she floats down. Like I can see how that he puts that together.
Yeah. Well,
I can see how he puts it together.
So that's so interesting, and it ties into, because there's a lot of water symbolism in Mary Poppins that
yes.
I thought about, but I just did not put that together with thinking of it as being set in an ocean. But and we'll talk about that in the next, when we get to the next chapter. I think it talks all about symbolism. Was there anything, I loved how he talked about connecting the world to the hero's overall development. I had never thought of that before.
Yeah.
But I think in the book that I'm writing now, it's set in a small town, and she goes from a big city, Chicago, to a small town in South Dakota. And then eventually she'll go to a little bit bigger town, but still a smaller town in South Dakota. And she's learning things along the way. And I love how he talks about how you can use a story to do that, to help your character, or not story, use a story world to help your character develop. And that's why you should consciously think about where you put them. Just don't put them in Nebraska because that's where you're from. And you have to build a world in Nebraska that suits your character.
In the same place where he talks about that, I like how he points out that the value in making your character small is that he immediately becomes more heroic.
Yes. Yep.
So, and he points out, he says, Jack climbs a beanstalk to battle a giant, and he must use his brain, not his brawn, to win the fight. So because he's so small, he's immediately a hero. As soon as he starts climbing up that beanstalk, you're like, go, Jack, go, right? So, I mean, it's when you put the posing, if your character is so much smaller, everything he does would be huge, right? Because he's not expected.
Which page is that one on?
That one's on 174. He talks about big to small and small to big.
Yep. And passageways between worlds.
Yeah.
I hope you guys are reading along with us in the Writers Author Craft Book Club.
Yes, and even though we're only taking 5 weeks to go through it, to really get this book, you're probably gonna want more than 5 weeks.
Yeah,
it's a lot. I'm gonna, as I was especially when I was finishing up the other pieces, I was like, wait a minute, I have that part in my story. Maybe I need to change that because this sounds so much better, like to do it this way. So
yeah.
You might be reading it and think, oh, where's my story? I need to change it. I need to make a note in my manuscript. So don't feel like you have to stay with us the 5 weeks. Read it at what works for you. And know that we both know it's going to take you longer than 5 weeks, unless you're just straight up reading it. If you're just reading it like you would read Harry Potter, yeah, 5 weeks is fine. But if you want to actually get out of it what there is to get out of it, it's going to take you longer than 5 weeks.
Just saying.
Yeah.
All right. So that story world, what else in this chapter did you pull out to note?
Let me see. He has there's so much. Like he brings up things that I hadn't even thought about as a story world or whatever. Like, so I'm yeah, like, okay, this is just, see all my highlights?
Yeah.
See all my highlights? Like, and that one is, there's just so much. So let me see if there's anything else that I definitely wanted to, he even points out time and
yeah,
past, future, seasons, like when to use them, when not to use them, what they mean, the benefit that they have, the single day, the perfect day, how to end time, like things you don't even like think of. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that is, and you're right, that is an important part of, it's just, and then he goes into story world through structure. And he does say that there are 7 key structure steps, and that every story, no matter how short, needs to have these 7 keys. Now, there are the title of the book, the little tagline at the bottom, 22 steps to becoming a master storyteller, sorry. And he goes later in the book, he does go through all those 22 steps. Some of your stories will have 22, some will have 15, some will have 26, right? But he says every story has to have these 7 steps in order to be the possibility of being a great story. If you're missing any of these 7,
Mhm.
you've missed the mark. And I don't want to go because I want you to buy the book.
Yes,
I want you to buy the book.
buy the book.
So I'm not going to tell you what the 7 steps are. However, do what?
I said teaser.
Teaser. But he does go through all 7 of them, what they are, and then he breaks down a couple of movies, because this is written for screenplay, the book. However, it can be for not screenplays. So the things that he discusses in this book, his examples, are movies, but like he breaks it down, and his examples, 2 of them, this so you see it goes across the board, are Star Wars and It's a Wonderful Life. Those are opposite ends of the spectrum, right? They are 2 of his examples, and he points out how they each use it and make it work for what that story needs. But it's the 7 steps. Every story needs to have these 7 steps. Novella, short story, doesn't matter. Just sometimes the 7 steps are going to be quicker because your story is shorter.
Yep. And I love the exercise he gives for the story world. I mean, it starts here and it goes down here. So this is not just your 5 little bullet point exercises.
Yeah.
This is something to use for your work in progress, your WIP, and take it through so that you are consciously and thoughtfully building a story world that grows or develops with your character, and using things thoughtfully, like seasons. How are the seasons important to your story, for example, is one of the exercises, part of that exercise. So I love how practical the exercises are, and this one goes deep because the story world is so huge. It's so important. I never thought of how important the setting is to the character, or to the character's development, and to the story, and how you use it. I mean, I've always wanted to be able to write that kind of story where the setting is a character, and this can certainly get you there because you are thinking, you're building systems and using the natural setting in a certain way. So I really love how thorough the exercise is for story world.
Yeah, his homework's no joke. Like a couple of the books that we've gone over, your homework would take you 15 minutes. So and this is the other thing I love about this, is that he's like, here's your writing exercise and here's all the bullet points. And just so you don't think I'm ludicrous, here, let me break down Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for you. And he does in 5 pages. It's more than 5 pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages to do Harry Potter. So it's not just you're going, how does he even get that? Well, he shows you. So if you don't understand something, that's the other thing, is if you don't understand what he's talking about, and believe me, I'm telling you this piece of advice because I did it. If you don't understand what he's talking about, read his example.
Mm-hmm.
See how he's applying what he's saying to his example, and you'll better understand what he's talking about. Because I couldn't tell you how many books I've read on the writing craft and all the things, but this is like otherworldly. Like it's just.
Well, the other thing about other writing craft books is they give you the exercise and then you have to go off and do it. But you never really see a real world example of that exercise.
Like what the author meant when they said
step by step, like for so that's why the example is several pages long, and they're small pages. So if this was 8.5 by 11, this is like 20 pages that he's written on
a little print.
breaking down not just Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, but the story world that J.K. Rowling built for
Yeah.
Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, like the systems that she set up, the value propositions. And if you're writing fantasy, I mean, all of this stuff, you have to think about all of this stuff. So this is a great exercise to use.
I'm looking forward to taking my middle grade fantasy and taking it back to each of these exercises and making sure that I hit all of the pieces, because my heart for what I'm writing is bigger than just the one book that I'm writing. So I want to make sure that I get it like right. So then when it's done, I'm not going, oh, I wish I had, like, I will know that I've put everything out there. And then if it doesn't work, I just suck. But it's not because I missed steps, like I did all the things, right?
So
yeah,
it's, you don't suck. You're gonna do a great book and you're gonna get it edited. It's gonna be a good book. It's not gonna suck.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll know based on the number of people who give me good reviews.
That's also a part of marketing, though. Lots of marketing stuff. All right. Yeah. So are you ready to move on to Symbol Web, chapter 7?
Yes. Okay. Yes. And as I'm looking at this, I'm going, wait, what was this about?
I did not spend as much time on that. That's so I'm not sure about you guys out there in YouTube world, but I loved this. Let me go to my notes. It was great, and I got it. And one of the things that he writes here, but it's further down. He talks about early on. He talks about how symbols work and building a symbol web. The symbol web, I did not know that I'd have quite as much use for, so I did not spend as much time on it. But he does give you, once again, examples of how symbols are used in the Odyssey. And of course, everybody, when they think about a symbol, everybody thinks of scarlet letter, the big A, the red A, and how that it took me back to high school to remember how the symbol of the A changed in that book. Like, oh yeah, that's right. That's true. And then he talks about hybrid men and their special powers and the superhero franchise, and in the cherry orchard, what the cherry orchard symbolizes. So he gives you great examples. And then, of course, how to build a symbol line to go with your designing principle and your theme line, and then story world, which we came up with. So it's, again, about being, it's not the right word, which is why I keep stumbling over it. It's consciously doing it or thoughtfully doing it, about the symbols that you put in your book. Sometimes they occur if you're a pantser. These things appear in your book and you don't even know how they got there. Like, oh, the squirrel is a symbol for her constant struggle with her innocence. Like, is it really? Wow, I'm good. I'm that good. I had no idea. But at least here you can see examples of how it's done and then maybe apply that to your own writing. And one of the things that I pulled out for this one was a quote on page 227. Symbols are excellent tools for defining character and furthering your story's overall purpose. And there was one part of the symbol chapter that I really liked. I liked how he said you can use symbols as a shorthand. That really spoke to me.
Yeah. I also liked that he said that your symbols can evoke an emotion, and to make sure that you aren't using it too much, because then it becomes less than what you meant it to be. Yeah. So you don't want it to always be there. You want it, like Thor's hammer, right? He uses it when it's necessary. He doesn't just go around and he doesn't use it to open a door, right? Yeah. Instead of just turning the handle, right? So use what you have for what it's meant for, not as everyday whatever. He also says that you should always create a web of symbols in which each symbol helps define the others. So it's not about just having one symbol. So I'm going to go back to, he also says that always create a web of symbols in which each symbol helps define the others. So if you're going to use a symbol and you have more than one symbol, make sure that they are working together to enhance one another, and they're not just there to be there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let me see. And he's got a gazillion examples.
Yes.
Then
One of
he
the
goes into, oh, sorry.
one of the ones, I don't know if I'm ahead of you. I'm on page 232 about where he talks about symbolic name. I was just going to say it's not quite, but there are like a couple of types of symbols that I thought about consciously before I started writing my book, or while I was writing my book, and that was the names. What do the names mean? And most people don't think about what names mean in real life. Like, Amy means goddess of the night. I wonder if Amy, I have no idea what
It means beloved, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, okay. Well, look at that. That's apropos. But
the guy version of my name is David.
Really?
It also means beloved. Yep.
Interesting. Well, see, and that's so you can use names as symbols or in your book to mean things, and the characters can embody that symbol or not, and that could mean something in your book. And so I have characters in my book, and I wanted one particular character. Her name was given to her for a specific reason, and we don't find out that reason till almost towards the end of the book. But I a lot of the other symbols that he talks about, like the animal symbols and things like that, I'm trying to figure out how I could apply those. I think they apply in a lot of, you can use those in fantasy books and other books, but I've seen animals used as symbols in other books. And I was just going to say that how you can use, we talked about how he talks about using them as shorthand. I love that idea that animals or names or things like that mean something to people already universally. Sometimes it depends on the culture. And so that could depend on your genre, but how that meaning, you can pick that up, and instead of having to write pages and pages of what something means, you can just use a symbol as, again,
right. Yeah. And, I hadn't really thought about it, but when you name a child in real life, the meaning. Mm-hmm. You also look up what could be a nickname based on the name, or the initials put together, what they could be. Because the way I think of it is, kids can be mean, right? So you don't necessarily want to give your daughter a name with the initials PMS, right? You don't want to do that, right? But then I have a friend that I grew up with who his initials, and the reason I remember his name is because his initials spelled out jam. So like, I remember that, right? But you have to really, if we do that in real life, why would we not do that with our characters? Now, for me, my sci-fi, mm-hmm. all of their names, without realizing it, are symbolic. Most of their names are symbolic to them and their role in my story. My middle grade fantasy, mm-hmm. they're not. So now I actually do need to go back and make sure that I haven't inadvertently named one of my characters something that somebody's like, oh, do you know what that means? You know what I mean? I need to go back and, yeah, because they're real life names. They're not made up names.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing right before that, he talks about machine symbolism. And I think it's interesting that he points out Frankenstein, and how Frankenstein, in the beginning of Frankenstein, he's a monster. But by the end of the book, he's really the only one acting like a human.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but it was really good. Okay, so past the name, symbol connected to character change, symbolic themes, symbol for story world. Like, he just goes on to like all of these symbols that I hadn't even thought about that were symbols in things. And then actions that the characters take. And it does point out, be careful how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want it to make it something that it's not.
Yeah. There's one epiphany I had. There are several epiphanies I have had.
I was like, just one?
But one when he talks about the symbol web in certain genres, like he talks about the horror symbol web with an example from Dracula, and then he talks about the Western symbol web. And I have to say, when he talks about the Western, it explains a lot why I'm not a fan of that genre. It's like, oh, I don't like that. Nope, that's why I don't read that. Whereas I will read the horror and the other genre. I mean, I'll read any good book. If it's a good book, or a movie, I just watched a Western. Hey, you guys want a good Western? The Harder They Fall on Netflix. That's just fabulous. It's gorgeous, just gorgeous. Anyway.
And did it have all these symbols in it?
It had a lot of them. Yes, it did. It had, the standoff, the representation of the
bad guy wearing the black hat.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fence line.
And it had the fence line in there. They added some newer ones. So they updated theirs with colors and textures. And it's got a little humor in it. That's one of the pain points I have with Westerns is there's so little hope. I mean, there's justice, but I just feel bad before the good guy is just always alone, or they die in the street doing the right thing. I need a little hope with my stuff. But anyway,
have you seen Cowboys versus Aliens?
I have. That's a cute one. I like that.
I like that one.
I thought I dragged my husband to that because I said, you like Westerns. He loves Westerns. I love sci-fi. I'm like, this is the movie made for us. And he's like, it could not happen in real life. I don't want to see it. Well, that's the whole point. It's a movie. But he did go see it, and he thought it was silly. It was
good.
It was
yeah.
Cute. I did think it was cute. And
it had the right amount of comedy where it needed to have it, and serious where it needed to have it. And then the actors, I mean, come on.
Well, yeah. And that, that's the other thing about that. See, we're getting off on a whole tangent, but that's why so many other books pull in Westerns, because of the symbolism in Westerns. Like when you have a Star Trek has done the Western, I don't know how many times. Each franchise has done their take on a Western, and the standoff and the lawman and, all of that stuff. And what was Firefly? Firefly was...
Oh, I love Firefly.
One of my faves. Firefly, of course, is a space Western. Basically, that's what it is. So, and it's cool to just read about how that works and go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense when you talk about genre.
Yep. And then at the end, of course, he has the writing exercise again, right? It is not as detailed as writing exercise number 5, but he still does the same thing. Here's your exercise, and here's how you apply it. And he applied it to Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings is chock full of symbols. It has all the symbols.
My precious. Yes, it does.
Actually, what I like to say all the time is, thou shalt not pass.
Oh.
That's what I like to say all the time. Yeah. Is there anything else? Is there anything else you'd like to say about chapters 6 and 7?
Nothing else for me.
All righty. Guys, put your comments down below. Let us know what you think. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And we will see you next week, where we discuss the next 2 chapters, 8 and 9, which I think 8 is one of my favorites.
I think, I read this whole book just to get to chapter 8 and chapter 9. So,
the next one's going to be good.
This is the first time I've ever gotten this far in this book, and I'm so glad we finally did. So more to come. Okay.
Right. See y'all next week. Bye.